And we are now live.
Is everything okay, Pat?
Yep, everything's going fine.
Good.
The screen is a little distorted, but I don't know why it's doing that, but that'll go away here in a second, and it shouldn't matter with your photos.
All right.
The PowerPoint screen.
Oh, okay. Do you have anybody watching us?
We have 2 viewers on Facebook, and I can't see YouTube at the moment, but
Hi, viewers on Facebook.
we'll get started in just a couple minutes.
Hey, Pat, with this new format, is our name steady underneath us all the time?
Um,
I'm just
no,
wondering if I
no,
should.
it is not.
No? Okay, only on my end. Okay, I didn't know if I should reposition the camera.
Nope.
Okay.
All right, let's just go ahead and jump in. Getting started this morning. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in this morning. Good morning. Another Mornings with the Museum program. First time in over a month that we've done this. Did this every week while we were closed, but since we have opened, we're doing this on a little more limited basis. But happy to have you back joining us if you're returning, or if this is your first time joining the Museum of the Grand Prairie. Welcome. But before we get started with our Mornings with the Museum program today, did want to go over a few things. First, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves, those of us here from the museum, to those out there watching. My name is Pat Kane. I'm the Public Programs Visitor Services Coordinator at the Museum of the Grand Prairie and other parts of the Champaign County Forest Preserve District. Barb, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Barb Olschlager-Garvey. I'm the director of the Museum and Education Department, which includes the Museum of the Grand Prairie and also staff at the Homer Lake Interpreter Center.
Thanks, Barb. Katie, what about you?
Hi, I'm Katie Snyder. I'm the Education Program Specialist at Museum of the Grand Prairie, which is part of the Champaign County Forest Preserve District.
Thank you, Katie. And Mark, how about you?
Good morning. I'm Mark Hansen. I'm the curator for the Museum of the Grand Prairie.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks all of you for joining us today for the Mornings with the Museum program. Our theme today is Celebrate Suffrage. And in just a few moments, I'm going to ask staff members here some questions related to this big topic of suffrage. Yesterday was a huge historic anniversary in women's suffrage. We'll talk about that in just a few moments. But a few things. We always love to know where you're watching from. So if you could, let us know where you're watching from this morning by writing it down in the comment section below. I'm streaming live from the Museum of the Grand Prairie, right in front of our special exhibit space that I'm sure we will talk about in a few moments as well, related to women's suffrage. So write that down in the comment section below.
What the heck's happening? Okay, sorry.
A few other things just to promote some things. The Museum of the Grand Prairie, we opened at the beginning of July on a limited basis, and we're open now Tuesdays through Saturdays from 1 to 5 p.m. But museum visitors, if you want to come visit us, pre-register before visiting by going to our website or Facebook page. We also are asking all of our visitors to wear masks and follow other safety protocols while visiting. You can find out all of those details again by checking out that information on our Facebook and website. We've got a ton of digital content that is now on our social media pages over the past several months while being closed, and upping our virtual presence as much as we can so we can reach you out there, the community. So check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Goodreads for a whole bunch of stories of local history. We've highlighted pieces from our collection. We got virtual summer camp videos, virtual events, virtual concerts, and much, much more. So again, check out that information on our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Goodreads. One other event to promote tomorrow night, right behind me actually, we're going to have our second installment in our new virtual concert series titled Soloists for Suffrage, where we're going to stream 4 virtual concerts from July through October on the 3rd Thursday of each month, featuring some awesome local female artists from the Champaign County community. And tomorrow night, Karina Say, again, is going to be performing right behind me from 7 to 8:30 p.m. It'll be broadcast again right here on our Facebook and YouTube pages. If you have any other questions, we would love to answer your questions. That's the purpose of this program. We love to hear from our audience out there. So if you have any questions for us, again, write those down in the comment section below. It makes the program much more engaging and fun for us and for you, the viewer, if you ask us questions, whether it's about the museum, historical topics. We're talking about suffrage today. Any questions about suffrage, local history, any other questions you may have for us, ask those down in the comment section below, and we would love to answer them live. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into the theme for today, and I'll start the questions to get us going. So the theme for today is Celebrate Suffrage. With the historic centennial anniversary of the 19th Amendment's ratification happening yesterday on August 18th. August 18th, 1920 is when the 19th Amendment was officially ratified to the U.S. Constitution, with Tennessee being that final state needed to ratify that amendment. So it was officially added to the Constitution. Big anniversary yesterday. We thought it was super appropriate to have the theme today be Celebrate Suffrage. So a few questions on the topic, and also if you have questions on the topic, again, write those down in the comments section below. So first question for museum staff here with us. With 2020 marking this 100 years since the 19th Amendment was added to the U.S. Constitution, what does this historic anniversary mean to you? So who would like to take that one and go first?
I'll go first, like
Yep.
I always do. I remember when I voted a couple of years ago in the presidential election, being overwhelmed by the thought that my grandmother, as an adult, couldn't vote. It's as simple as that. Half of the population couldn't vote. It's a great day when you free that many people all at once. I know there were some people who have had barriers to voting since then, and we always want to make sure that everyone can. But that's a huge victory for people everywhere. That's what it means to me.
Well, thanks, Barb. Very, very personal, this anniversary to you, as well as I'm sure many other folks out there, of course, as well.
I could
Okay, Katie.
piggyback off that if that'd be okay. So, it means a lot because everyone should have been able to vote from the very beginning, right? We all know that originally it was basically white men who owned property who could vote. White women got the vote, 100 years ago. It was, I believe, 1924 when Native American women got the vote.
It's actually Native Americans in general.
Right,
Native American men couldn't vote either.
Exactly, yes. Native Americans in general, because, as Barb was probably alluding to at that point, Native Americans, hard to believe and not hard to believe, weren't considered citizens of the United States. So 1924 for Native American women, was it 1943 for Chinese Americans, Barb?
Mhm.
I believe it was 1943 for Chinese Americans. As Barb was saying before, all Chinese Americans were not considered citizens. And as many of you know, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 made it more possible for African Americans, both women and men, to vote. Prior to that, there was a lot of voter suppression. I mean, just kind of amazing things, with poll tax and tests and things like that. And as many of you know, that changed things for quite a while. And then 2013, the Supreme Court put those kind of things in the hands of the states rather than the federal government, made the federal oversight, less complete. And so we started to see more like, stopping people from doing early voting, voter IDs being needed, not being able to do same day registration. And of course, as many of you know in the news right now, in the middle of the pandemic, when people would like to be able to not put their lives at risk and vote by mail, we have a different form of what many people would say is voter suppression by putting, making it hard to vote by mail with the things that are going on with the post office. And just yesterday in the news, we know that a lot of that is going to be suspended till after the election, but some measures were already put in place. So what I'm trying to say, long story, very long, is it's a great thing. It's a great thing that women were allowed to vote. But I always say with these things, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. And there are always going to be people that want to suppress the vote, unfortunately. Oftentimes the vote of women, oftentimes the vote of marginalized communities. So I'm glad it happened. Obviously, I wouldn't be sitting here today if it hadn't happened.
That's right.
But we have a long way to go. And so those of us who have the privilege to vote, I think need to work hard to make sure that everyone has an equal privilege to vote.
Yep. And interestingly, there was one woman in Congress when suffrage was passed as a potential amendment to be ratified, right? There was one woman in Congress who was able to vote for the rights of women to vote.
Was she from Wyoming? Where was she from, Barb?
You're from Montana.
Montana, okay.
Jeanette Rankin, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, we have to be sure when we have the privilege to help other people get to vote, right? Those men voted for women to vote.
Yeah.
and they recognized that they had privilege.
And as Barb mentioned, that there was a congresswoman, so states were ratifying votes for different kinds of voting.
Right,
early.
right.
Viewers may or may not know that as well.
Right.
Because people might say, how is there a woman in Congress if women, well, you could actually, I believe, be elected but not cast a ballot for yourself in some places. Is that correct, Barb?
Right. There were states. Well, actually, that was true in Illinois. There were offices you were able to hold as a woman, but you were not able to vote for.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of stunning, but okay.
It does seem pretty absurd right now.
Yeah, absurd's a good word for that. Yeah. Katie, as you mentioned, it was a big deal. The the, August 18th, 1920, when the amendment was ratified. But, but there was still much progress to be made after that. And then here we are in 2020. And, one of the things that's highlighted in the exhibit behind us, that each one of you had a direct hand in, is that, still, yes, we have made a bunch of progress, but still long way to go in terms of, equality, in terms of suffrage, and a number of other things too. So,
Yep.
Mark, did you want to respond to the question? What does the historic anniversary mean to you?
I think everyone covered it pretty well. I mean, it's a monumental milestone in our history, but there's always a danger in that. Well, we did it. We're done. Well, no, we're not done. As Katie mentioned, there are still plenty of issues with voting for large populations in our country that need to be addressed, as well as countless other issues where people are unable to equally participate in our country's government, in their own government. So it's good to celebrate that, but we can't rest on the laurels of that either. We need to be sure that we're building on that and continuing moving forward, and not just holding the line and enjoying what others have done before us.
Right. Good.
Right on, Mark. Okay, so again, viewers out there, if you have any questions for us on the topic, or you have some thoughts, we'd love to know what this historic anniversary means to you. Write that in the comment section down below. We would love to know what the historic anniversary of yesterday, being 100 years since the 19th Amendment was ratified to the U.S. Constitution. What does that mean to you? Let us know down below. Or if you have any other questions, write those down below too. Okay, another question for you three. So the exhibit behind me, as I mentioned, How Long Must Women Wait? Women's Suffrage and Women's Rights in Champaign County is the title of this exhibit back here that we opened back in March. And it features a ton of great stories. And I was wondering if the three of you, could you let me know what's your favorite story, or maybe a couple stories, if you can't decide on just one, and why is that your favorite? And then explain a little bit more for the viewers out there.
Jump right in, guys.
You're always first, Barb.
I don't have to be though.
Are you going to
Okay,
walk
Pat,
around? Are you
roll
gonna
on.
walk around and show people, Pat, when we talk about it? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. If you tell me where to go, what you want to see, I will take us right there virtually. I'll walk back there. So
Okay.
Barb, you want to go first?
Yeah, I in fact I decided that it would be easier to see the things on with slides, so we're gonna put the slides up. I had two favorites. One of them is that Susan B. Anthony came to speak in Champaign in 1870. On March 30th of 1870, and she spoke in Barrett's Hall, which was right at the intersection of Neal Street and what is now Church Street. So right where Big Grove Tavern is. There's a little marker there, and if you recall, at the last presidential election, women came there to put their stickers to say they voted. But the cool thing is that Susan B. Anthony came to speak about women's wages. She came to speak about the right to vote as well, but she was concerned because there were more and more women in the workplace and they weren't being equally paid. Crazy thing. So there we go, talking about how certain things haven't been attained, and certainly that one still hasn't. And then also that women had no control over their own earnings. So if they were married, that they had no control over what happened to the money that they earned. So she spoke in March of 1870, and but 2 years earlier, she had started a newspaper all about women's rights called The Revolution. Pat, can you go to the next one?
Can you see that okay?
Yeah, that's not the same as the one. Yeah, that's the newspaper. Just go on ahead to the next one. And this article appeared in mid-May in the Champaign Gazette, and it was about a gathering in Farmer City. So we all know where Farmer City is, right? It's the little town between Champaign and Bloomington on 74. So in Little Farmer City in 1870, on May 7th, Nellie Pyatt, who was from Monticello, came to speak about the new revolution. Having heard Susan B. Anthony in Champaign, I mean, this is local history, guys. And she spoke about women's suffrage, and the audience was large and enthusiastic in a tiny little town in Illinois. People were already, 50 years before, is that right? 50 years before women actually attained the vote, people were agitating for the vote in Farmer City, in Monticello, in Champaign, in places that would seem inconsequential, right? But of course, it took the whole country to be behind it to make this happen 50 years later. So that's one of my favorite stories. I have another favorite, but I'll leave time. Maybe we could talk about it after Katie and Mark get a chance to talk.
I'll go next if that's okay.
Sure, go for it.
So Pat, I'd like you to go over to the one, you probably know where I'm going to go, to my mom.
Sure.
I want to do two. I'll talk about Irene Palucci, and then I'll talk briefly about it. I picked these two because these are women I know. So when we think about this, we think this was a million years ago, right? We're going to look at something about a woman named Irene Palucci, who happens to be my mother. She was born in 1923, so she was 3 years old when white women were granted the right to vote. So she grew up in a very different time than I did. My daughter grew up in a very different time than me, and each generation it's a little bit different. So this is my mom, Irene Palucci. You can see her right there, all dressed up for work. So she, when she was a young girl, women in our social class, and often men, didn't go to college. She went to business school, and she's all dressed up because when she went to business school, one thing she learned is that you wear a suit and you wear a hat and you wear gloves and all those kind of things. You wear your heels and you go to work. But the reason she's in this exhibit is because she was working for Peoria Caterpillar Company during World War II, and you see her little comptometer, I think that's what it's called. It's basically an early adding machine. So she was in the purchasing department, and she bought and sold parts, mostly selling parts to repair machinery in the war. And the reason why it's in here is because every time she would put in an order or send out an invoice, it was questioned by the brass in the military over and over and over and over and over again. And her boss came to her and said, I think this is happening because you're a woman. I think this is because your name is Irene. How about you put I.P., I Palucci. So she did that, and none of her orders were ever questioned again. None of the mail orders were ever questioned. So that's my mom. And then Pat, could you walk to the end where the Women's March things are? I wanted to show Mary Alice Viano. So Mary Alice Viano, she recently passed. But she was in her 90s at the Women's March. So Mary Alice had 6 kids. In my neighborhood, there was a lot of 6 kids, 8 kids, those kind of, that's the way it was. She had 5 girls and 1 boy. She was always very civic-minded, a bit of an activist in the way that housewives were activists at the time. And there are lots of different ways to be activists. So she would write, make phone calls for candidates, send out postcards. And in her 90s, she wanted to make sure she got to the Women's March in 2017, in January of 2017. And it was really difficult for her to do so because she could walk, but not a lot. And she had to go in a wheelchair. And 3 of her daughters took her there, and some of her granddaughters. And I just think it's real inspirational to watch the elders in each generation. It's super inspirational to watch the young folks doing what they do, but we also got the older women. Pat, can you see what her sign says from there?
92 and still up for grabs.
She's funny. So, we recently lost Mary Alice, but, she was feisty to the end. And I just think that's great. She was probably born, she was a couple years younger than my mom, so I'm not exactly sure if she was born, what year she was born, but both she and my mom were right around the time that the 19th Amendment passed. So, and think of all they saw in their lifetimes, right? And what my mother is still seeing. So, personal stories. That's what I got.
That's great.
In history, when I was teaching before I came here, I've said it before, I feel history is always so personal, these personal stories, studying the great big figures is great, in history, but these personal stories of people just like you and me, ones that I enjoy. So, all right, Mark, what's your favorite story out of this exhibit space?
Yeah, I think mine is Sojourner Truth. She's a woman. When you read her speeches and what she wrote, wow, pretty powerful stuff. And it's easy to forget that she was born a slave. She was a piece of property for the majority of her life. And, one can't help but wonder, what we lost by suppressing folks like Sojourner Truth. I mean, how many artists will we not get to see their work because, it wasn't allowed. They were property. We see some of that even today. Populations that aren't given equal opportunities. What are we losing? Both in U.S. culture, but both also in humanity. I mean, are one of these people that is not being given equal opportunity, is that the person who is meant to cure cancer? Is there, are one of these people the next Van Gogh or Beethoven? And we'll never know because society has deemed them somehow less worthy than another group of people. And for me, Sojourner Truth really sort of brings that home, that giving everyone the opportunity to find their way and find their place is a benefit to us all in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And it's really troubling to think about what we've lost, that we'll never know and can certainly never fully get back.
Yeah.
Pat, can we link in the comments the speech by Sojourner Truth, read by Kerry Washington? Can we link that?
Sure. Yeah, we'll put that in the comment section afterwards.
Okay.
And just a caution about the speech. It's been recorded as being made by someone who has the typical patois of an enslaved person in the South. But Sojourner Truth was enslaved in New York and worked for a Dutch family and had a Dutch accent. So it's not entirely accurate, but it's still good to hear the words.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well,
You want me to do my second story, or are we out of time?
we're a little short on time. It's a little bit past 10:30 already. So I was just going to see if we could close up with last question. Well, we had one question from a viewer, familiar face, Stacy Clements, wants to know what were the first rules for women when they were allowed to vote? Were they the same as men? Age requirement, etc.
Well, the age was the same. They had to produce when women were first allowed to vote in Illinois, there were a lot of restrictions. They could not use they could not be Mrs. George whatever. They had to come with birth certificate and use their own name. They had to verify that they were, they had to verify what age they were, obviously. And a really interesting thing is that women didn't necessarily know how to vote. I mean, if you haven't ever done it before, you could be scared of doing it. And so there were a couple of people, one who lived in Champaign, who wrote a book on how for women, not what to vote for, but how to vote. These are the things you're going to be expected to do. This is how you check the box. Don't check more than these many boxes. You know, there was a lot of complication to the process that women were afraid of. I mean, and I would be too. The first time you ever do anything, and especially something that has so much import and so much of a big deal has been made out of, you know. So that was the thing I was surprised to find out, that you really have to educate people about just the process.
That made me think of a research project I was doing where I went to the archives at the Urbana Free Library, and I was looking up, actually for my interview for this job, I did a little presentation on women's suffrage, and I looked at ads right around the time I was looking for local history, and also ads right around the time of women getting the vote. And it was really interesting to me how not corporations, but local businesses started.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think, was it Busey Bank that started, we have a bathroom for women now. Like they started doing things for women that they didn't do before, you know, like there was no woman's bathroom because why would women be out doing business, you know?
Right.
And then a lot of ads that showed the ballot box. And then you noticed how politicians who were running for different office started to say things directly toward the woman's vote. I thought it was really interesting how before these businesses or these politicians, if you look at the newspapers a couple of months before that, you know, they didn't care, right? And then all of a sudden it was like that, and they were starting to court that vote. And the vote, either, you know, spending the dollar vote or the actual vote.
Yeah. It was interesting too how the parties played to women.
Yeah.
You know, to our new voters.
Yeah. I mean, some of the very first things women could vote for were things they thought were women's causes, right? Like school boards, you know, and you could run for a school board. And even up until, you know, when we were trying to pass the ERA in the 70s and the 80s, a lot of that started around those kinds of women's groups, you know, that were interested in women's issues were children's issues, which I always thought was really interesting because, children have fathers too, and that should be everybody's issue, right? It shouldn't have ever just been a woman's issue, but even now, that's kind of how politicians seem to see children, as a women's issue. And the two men on the panel, I bet you would agree that that's everybody's issue, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know if this is up to what Stacy was asking, but when women first got to vote in Illinois, they could only vote for certain offices. They could vote for things that were not mentioned in the state constitution, but not things that were. So a lot of local offices they couldn't vote for, but they could vote for president because that's not in the state constitution. So even the first bill in Illinois, which passed in 1913 to allow women to vote, didn't provide complete suffrage.
And that was different state by state. So some
yes, it was. Yep.
You could vote for your school board, but you couldn't vote for president. So,
and surprisingly, the West was more liberal. Illinois was the first state east of the Mississippi to allow women to vote in, even though it was partial suffrage. So they called it suffrage to allow so much voting by women.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many women in Illinois. It made a big difference in the next senatorial and presidential elections.
And the first woman who ran for president was prior to the women getting the vote, right, Barb?
Yeah, there were a couple of women who ran before. They didn't run in major parties, but
right.
There were a couple of women who did. Mm-hmm.
Right. Lots of history in there if you dig.
Yeah, so come see the exhibit. Yes,
Yeah.
There's so much in it.
Stacy said thanks. I think,
can't hear you, Pat.
We lost.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
now
now
we can. Now we can.
Stacy said thanks all. So I think we answered her question.
Okay.
Good enough, I guess, for her. Okay, well, run out of time here, a little over time. One last thing, just real quick, from each of you. So how can, just, maybe in a short answer, how can those watching at home mark this historic anniversary? What do we think that people out there could do to help mark this historic anniversary? Any course of action they could take?
Vote.
Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Yeah, vote.
Yeah.
vote.
Absolutely vote. If you have elderly people that are, compromised in any way, or people who just want to stay healthy, help them fill out get a mail-in ballot. I helped my mom get a mail-in ballot. Make sure everyone is registered to vote and registered at their current address. Help people in that way if they want that help. And let's make sure everyone is able to vote and is able to have their vote counted.
Yep.
I know in Illinois, here locally, even here in Champaign County, it's pretty easy to register to vote. You can go to the Champaign County Clerk's website, do it in, 5-ish, 10-ish minutes. That's it.
Can you put that link in the comments too?
Sure. Yeah, I could link the Champaign County Clerk's website for those of us who are Champaign County folks.
That would be great. And I know that people that are concerned about mail-in ballots at this time with what's going on, there's going to be at least 5 drop-off places for ballots in Champaign County. So if you're concerned about mail and you don't want to stand in a line in a pandemic, you can drop your ballot directly, which is a really great thing. And I hope they're doing that across the state and across the nation.
You can also, come educate yourself on the.
I couldn't hear you. What?
I said you can also come educate yourself on the history of women and voting in this great exhibit behind you, which will be there until at least December 31st, and we plan, unless things get really, really worse, to continue to be open until then. So Tuesday through Saturdays.
Yep.
You want to tell them how to sign up to come see the exhibit, Pat?
Yeah, they could, if you're just looking to visit the museum, check out this exhibit space behind me. Visit our Facebook page or our website where you can pre-register to sign up for a time session. We do time sessions from 1 to 5 p.m. You can sign up for a time slot. We allow up to 10 people per hour to visit the museum. So, register if you want to come and see us ahead of time, so you can reserve your spot to check out this exhibit space. If you're unable to come and see us, for whatever reason, maybe something is keeping you home, staying safe, or if you're somewhere across the country, you could always check out virtual tours of this exhibit space that we've done. Barb led a virtual tour narrated, I believe way back in April, which feels like decades ago.
Seriously.
But Barb led a guided tour through the space. We've got other exhibit tours there too. So check those out if you can't come and see us, or come and see us. Okay. Well, anything else? Barb, you gonna say something?
No, I was just going to say that I was actually going to say two things. One is that there's a world of things to read out there, and I would always encourage people to educate themselves. But the other thing is that if there are elderly people like Irene Palucci in your family, talk to them about the barriers that they faced in their lives and write it down. Keep the history of your family. It's important.
That's a really good point.
I
Yeah.
started crying and I'm ended crying. But seriously, it is important for you to remember who you are, who your family is. It's important for your children to know. That's all I got to say.
Thanks, Barb. Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Mark. Thanks to everybody out there who tuned in today. Any parting words for the three of you?
Keep
Thank
on
you,
keeping
Ted, for doing it. Sorry.
Keep
I
on
said
keeping
keep
on.
on keeping on and vote.
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 Big election in many different ways. Every election is important, but this one is pretty big for many reasons. So vote, vote, vote.
Vote,
Anything
vote.
else?
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. We'll do another one next month, Mornings with the Museum, in September. The theme for that one is back to school. I know a lot of folks are are going back to school this week, next week, already have. Whatever that school environment looks like, whether you're working in it or you're learning in it, it's an interesting time to be in school. And we'll talk about school, history related to school. I got a one-room schoolhouse out here too. A lot of interesting stuff that we'll talk about at that Mornings with the Museum program. So tune in September for that one. Again, thanks to the three of you. Thanks everybody out there for watching. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.